Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 2019. Be prepared. Well, today I'll say be prepared to be energized.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Mark Green is here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for a wild ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. Guess what? Today I'm in London, England. What a beautiful place with a very special guest by the name of Jonathan Carrier. Jonathan, welcome to Cars Yeah. Do you have any gear, and are you ready to release the clutch?
I absolutely am, Mark. Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. Now, I know you've had a very busy day. You've been in lots of meetings today, so we're going to have a little fun, kind of let your hair down a little bit. I always say that because I wish I had some hair to let down, but we're going to have fun talking about a very cool device that your company has created. But before I introduce you and we dive into that, what's one little thing that most people may not know about you, Jonathan?
That one of my ancestors is in the House of Horrors at Madame Tussauds in London.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay. Now you got my curiosity piqued. Is this a one of your family members that you don't want to usually talk about, or yeah? Okay.
Typically, you can look him up. It's like we're talking several generations past the French Revolution. You know, he was, during the French Revolution, he's called Jean-Baptiste Carrier, and he was rather evil in his actions of killing innocent people and priests and so forth, and eventually he was beheaded, and that's why his head is on a spike, not far from Marie Antoinette as well, in the dungeon at Madame Tussauds.
Oh my gosh! Wow. Well, yeah, that's rather interesting. So
yeah, there's an unusual one probably for one of your podcasts.
That is probably one of the more, if not the most unusual answer to that question. I've gotten some pretty interesting answers to that question, and some people are a little shy about it. But yeah, that's got to be a first. Yeah, my ancestor's head is on a stake, so there you go. Wow. Well, let's talk about something that's very energizing here, and I'll give you a proper introduction. Jonathan Carrier is the co-founder of ZipCharge, the world's first portable EV charger, a portable power bank on wheels, if you will. ZipCharge enables EV drivers to charge wherever they're parked. It's a revolutionary product, removing the common barriers to EV ownership, bringing the possibilities of home charging to anyone who cannot currently plug in at home or their office. Jonathan has over 20 years in the global automotive industry, working for Fiat, Mclaren, Jaguar Land Rover, in global product strategy, developing some of the world's most iconic vehicles. Jonathan founded In Motion Ventures for JLR, building and investing in mobility startups, and has worked since in transportation innovation, developing flying cars, that's right, for urban air mobility, and planning lithium-ion battery gigafactories. This guy's been busy. He has supported numerous mobility startups as an advisor and a non-executive director. We'll be back in just a minute to learn a lot more about Jonathan and ZipCharge, but first a word from our valued sponsor, so give them a little love, and we'll be right back. Covercraft's newest 3-layer all-climate cover is especially engineered for moderate weather conditions, and it's treated with an extra UV-resistant formula. It's soft, it's breathable, and it's easy to store, all while pampering your paint, providing maximum UV, rain, and dust protection. If you live where it's windy, no worries. Simply add their gust guards for windy conditions to add extra protection to keep your cover in place. Your 3-layer all-climate cover is custom tailored with Covercraft's attention to detail, form and fit with the quality and attention to detail that's been their tradition since 1965. Covercraft protects cars, trucks, motorcycles, RVs, trailers, and watercraft too. Every one of my vehicles is protected with a Covercraft cover. And I have a deal for you. Use the code YEAH21, YEAH21 at covercraft.com, and you'll get 10% off your Covercraft order plus free shipping. That's right. So get 10% off with free shipping by simply using the code YEAH21 at checkout. Covercraft, protecting the things that move you. When it was time to renew my collector car policy, my carrier raised my rates by a lot. But why? My usage was the same, my car's value was the same, and I had never made a claim. I didn't even have a ticket. The only change was their rate, and they had no reason why. What's with that? I researched my options, I spoke to others, and with American Collectors Insurance is where I now have my policy. What a difference. A live person actually answers the phone. She spent time learning about me and my Porsche Turbo, the one I call my Orange Crush, and provided a reasonable quote. American Collectors Insurance now protects my special ride. I'm saving hundreds of dollars, and I can sleep at night knowing my baby is properly insured. Why wait until your next premium is due? Give them a call today for your personal agreed value quote. Call 866-AC1-YEAH. That's 866-224-9324. Tell them you're a friend of mine, Mark Green at Cars Yeah. American Collectors Insurance, classic car insurance designed by collectors for collectors, automotive enthusiasts just like you and me. That's American Collectors Insurance. So, Jonathan, let's dive a little deeper into this very fascinating career. You're a guy who likes to go out there and be adventurous, maybe not quite as crazy as some of your distant relatives were, and in a much more positive way. Let's talk, before we get into ZipCharge here, because I really want to dive into this. Give me a little bit more of your background, because you've worked in the automotive sectors and in startups and flying cars. Oh my gosh, you've been a busy guy.
Yeah, well, I've always been passionate about things that move, and I've been besotted with cars since I was 3 years old. I could name every car on the road when I was 3. And whilst car wasn't my first word, it's absolutely been at the heart and center of pretty much everything I've done. That made my kind of journey through school and education relatively simple, because I only had one focus, which was how do I work in the car industry? And therefore that led me to do an engineering degree, mechanical engineering, which is kind of out of favor at the moment because everything's electronic. But actually, when you train as an engineer, and I encourage anybody that would be thinking about an education to do engineering, because it's a great discipline to help you think about problem solving and how you approach a problem and how you analyze a situation, but also then you determine outcomes. And that can be applicable in every part of life, in your personal as much as it is in your business life, because every day we're having to solve problems of different sizes, different natures, and the opportunity that can come from that. So, I've been very fortunate working in the car industry because it's what I've always wanted to do. And I therefore consider what I've done to be more of a hobby and a vocation than it is actually a job, because I love what I do, and I love working in the industry of industries, one that fundamentally has such a profound impact in our society and how we live, because transportation and the car, I'm speaking to you as an American, where the car has been at the heart of the cultural revolution, in the US, because it's been liberty. It's about freedom, and it's about that choice and self-determination to do what you want when you can. And the car is the enabler for that. But we're at the precipice now of probably one of the greatest changes in the car industry that there's ever been, the advent of electrification, but also what that heralds in terms of the shift towards autonomous and also mobility as a service that fundamentally is reshaping. So there's never been a more exciting time to be working in this industry of industries and be a part of shaping that future and contributing, to it.
Yeah, it blows me away what's going on. And I've had over the last about 6 months, a lot of people on the show that work in the EV world, the battery technology world. I've never seen things change so fast in my life. And I'm really excited about what the future is going to bring. And when I saw your business, I went, okay, we need to talk, because what you guys have created here with ZipCharge is basically you've taken away one of those big barriers for people about owning electric cars. So let's talk about what ZipCharge is. When I looked at this, my first thought was this is akin to having a gas can you can carry in your car. But of course, we're talking about EV. So tell me about how this whole concept came about and describe to our listeners today. And of course, I always put links to my guest show notes page. You can go and see this product in action because it's so cool. ZipCharge, tell me all about it.
Sure. So the initial idea for a portable, what you'd call a jerry can or, a power bank, depending on your perspective, and we'll come to discuss more about the difference between the two, actually came from my co-founder, Richie. His brother lives in a part of London, similar to where I do, where we don't have any parking. We don't have driveways. We don't have garages. We live in what's called a terraced house, which is basically houses all connected together, what you'd call a townhouse in the US. But even with a townhouse in the US, it's not uncommon to have a driveway and or a garage that can sometimes go along with it. Whereas here, everybody's left to park on the street. That means you can't have a home charge point because you can't put cables across the sidewalk. You can't, you've got no way to charge it. So you're reliant on public infrastructure. His brother had bought an electric vehicle. He was going to the local Shell gas station to use the public charger there, but quickly found, even with the rise and small number of EVs on the road, that he was having to queue at most times in order to try to access it. So he said to his brother, knowing what he did as an electrical engineer, surely you must be able to come up with a way to solve this problem. So kind of Richie scratched his head and went, yeah, we could make something that's a portable battery, something that would allow you to charge it and then put the charge into the vehicle. And that's where the genesis of the idea was born. I came on board because we've known each other for about 18 years from when we've worked at Mclaren together. So, we've always been in touch and friends, and then basically helped turn the idea into a product, so one that's relevant. Who's the market? Who is the customer? How do we develop a product that has value for the customer? How does it solve the problem? What is the problem? And how can we therefore turn that into something of value for the customer and then value for us to grow a business from? And that's the journey we've been on over the last 18 months or so is to realize that vision, which is what you see in the Go today. So when we looked at that, whilst his brother's situation, is replicated by many other people, actually there's a broader opportunity here. Rather than thinking about it as a jerry can, so an emergency tool, something you take with you, so in case you run out of gas, it's far more empowering to think about the device as a power bank, just like for your mobile phone. Everyone typically has a power bank for their mobile phone and you plug it in when you can. You don't necessarily use your power bank when the battery on your phone goes to zero. Yeah, you actually plug it in as and when you can. You graze, you don't gorge. And this is a common, terminology that's used. Whereas with an internal combustion engine, if you've got a gas, powered car, you pretty much gorge. You let it go till the light comes on and then you take it to the gas station and you fill it up. But that's not the same behavior with an electric car because you have far more ready access to energy, principally to home, and ways at refueling it. It's not like you have a gas station in your garage or on your driveway at home that allows you to refuel as and when you need it, but you do have electricity everywhere. So when you have an electric vehicle, and I own one today, you very much charge little but often. You go to the grocery store and you charge up there if there is one. You top up at home and you top up here. And actually the behavior when you have an electric vehicle is very different because you realize you never have to drive to the gas station again. And here I'm very much in agreement with the CEO of ChargePoint, who's in America. And he believes that the gas station model is redundant, much to the chagrin of, the likes of the Aramcos and the Chevrons and everybody else, because they want to sustain their business for the future. And I agree, people don't want to drive to a charging station. They don't want to have to drive somewhere and wait 15, 20 minutes, even in the advent of super fast charging batteries, which will take some time to get here. You're still going to have to wait a certain period of time, certainly longer than it takes to fill up your tank with gas today. So our view was say, okay, so how do we create something that's more empowering? How do we create something that can be used every day? How do we create something that can help enable people to make the switch? Because when you look at a lot of the data, the number one reason why people reject an electric vehicle today partially is price, partially is what used to be called range anxiety, but the number one reason quoted now is charging anxiety. People are fundamentally concerned about how am I going to charge, where am I going to charge it? And the place that they're most concerned about it is at home. And the reason why is because your car is parked at home the majority of the time when you're not using it. It's either at work or it's at home. And particularly in the post-COVID era, where people are going into the office less, your car's even parked even more at home, so the need for charging where your vehicle is parked is critical. But the challenge is you've got 40% of car owners, and that's the consistent number around the world. It changes country by country, who don't have access to off-street parking and therefore they can't put a charger in. But in the US, it's even broader because if you rent, you can't put a charge point in. But if you live in a condo or if you live in a multi-unit dwelling, which is also common in the United States. You've got homeowner association rules that restrict you from being able to install a charge point. You have metering issues because often in those buildings and condos, it's a communal area and it's a shared meter and it's part of a maintenance cost for the building, the maintenance charge you pay for the building. So, you have a real problem about installing charge points in a way that allows people to charge individually. And when you don't have everybody with an EV, it therefore becomes a big issue to be able to solve.
Yeah.
So our journey was really about trying to create that product, something that was small enough, compact enough, but with enough energy and range that would deliver the people's daily driving needs. So in the United States, it's 26.5 miles. When you look at the travel surveys done by the US Census Bureau, 26.5 miles is the current average. And that was pre-COVID. That's not homogeneously distributed across all of the US states. Clearly in Wyoming and Utah, you're going to be doing more. You do 35, 36, 37, you travel more distances. But when you look at New York and California and even Florida, the three main markets where electric vehicles are sold in the US, the actual driving distance is in the low 20 miles a day. And in Europe, that figure is about 17, 18 miles. It's slightly higher in Germany. UK is about 17, 18. But pretty much generally around the world, everyone drives on a daily basis, on average, somewhere between 15 to 25 miles. And therefore, our product delivers a range in a Tesla Model 3, the world's biggest selling, electric vehicle, of between 20 and 40 miles. So therefore, it's enough to give you your daily range needs. So you can top it up every day. You don't even have to top up once. You could top up twice or three times because it's super easy to charge. You plug it into any socket. It charges up in just over an hour. You wheel it to your vehicle and it takes half an hour to discharge. And then you've added your kind of daily range. You could even then take it to work with you. You could plug it in at work, get electricity for free if your employer doesn't mind.
Yeah.
And then charge it in your lunch break. You've got so many different options. And the reason why is because you can turn any parking space into a charging spot. So instead of being reliant on charging infrastructure, which has a one-to-one relationship with the parking space, you can make any parking space able to charge your vehicle by having that charger. So, what we're trying to do is turn that concept of charging on its head. We say we want to add a new dimension, and that new dimension is around flexibility. So whilst it might not give you all of the energy you need, it can give you enough energy for your daily needs and therefore supplement it. And therefore, we think that's a good thing. It's a good thing because it can encourage more people to adopt electric vehicles. Now, depending on your perspective on climate change, if we can encourage more people to adopt electric vehicles and therefore make that shift, then theoretically, the better it is for society and also, the challenges that we faced ahead as a world. So, our view is this is a nudge technology. Something that can really encourage people to make that switch. It's not something that's replacing existing charging infrastructure. It's a complementary addition to how people will charge their vehicle, but also solve a very big problem for 40% of people that own cars and drive cars that won't be able to charge. And in a world of tomorrow where everybody has to have an electric vehicle, it's slightly different in the US, but in Europe, they're saying 2030, they're all going to be banned. You'll only ever be able to buy electric or a plug-in hybrid for a certain period of time for 5 years in the UK at least. Then everyone's going to need to be able to have access to low-cost, convenient charging anywhere you park. And that's ultimately what we deliver.
Holy cow. Man, this is pretty cool. I think back to a company I worked before. We sold a lot of things for garages and cars. And one of the things was a battery pack so you could, if your battery goes dead. And this thing was about the size of a briefcase. It weighed about the size of 20 bricks. And it was kind of a pain and so forth. And then I look at what now this is old long ago. Now I'm looking at what you're doing. It looks like a roller board that you could take on an airplane and put above. Very small, obviously not massively heavy because looking at it, your videos on your site, you pick it up, you can put it in your trunk.
Yep.
I think it's absolutely marvelous. And that's why I wanted to have you on the show. And again, I'll encourage you listeners to go check out the links to the website so you can see what we're talking about. I think it's going to blow everyone away. My son lives in San Francisco, doesn't have a garage, lives in a kind of a condo type thing. And same thing. He goes, we'd buy a Tesla tomorrow, but we can't really use it very effectively. And they have a bit of a drive when they do go down to the office, but most of the time they're working at home. But this would be a resounding solution to his challenge, which would fix things right away. So very exciting. We're going to take a short break and thank our sponsors. We come back. I want to talk a little bit about your personal passion for cars, because I understand you kind of like vehicles. Like you said, your second word was car, not your first word when you were a baby. So we'll be right back. This is cool stuff. Auto Geeks Blackfire SiO2 Spray Sealant. It's a spray-on, wipe-off sealant that's quick, safe, and easy to clean and protect your vehicles. I love using it on all my cars. Auto Geeks Blackfire SiO2 Spray Sealant is a spray-on, wipe-away sealant that uses SiO2 ingredients to provide a slick, brilliant, and long-lasting shine. Silicon dioxide is known to be one of the most effective ingredients in car care products, and Blackfire Spray Sealant takes advantage of every stunning feature it has to offer. This sealant will protect your paint from road film, dirt, and other common contaminants while providing an impeccable, long-lasting, hydrophobic surface that forces water to sheet and bead on your paint for months. Go to autogeek.net to get yours and for the best product selections on the internet today, along with their skilled technical support. Autogeek.net is where I go for all my detailing needs. That's autogeek.net. Check them out today. If you're listening to this program, there's a pretty good chance you believe what I believe, that the collector vehicles we love are more than just a means of getting from one place to the other. They're a part of our culture, our identity, and as a people, they bring us together at vintage races, classic car auctions, and 1,000-mile rallies. That's why I support the RPM Foundation, which exists to ensure that the critical skills necessary to preserve and restore these important vehicles aren't lost to time. RPM stands for Restoration, Preservation, and Mentorship, and their goal is to inspire the next generation of vehicle restoration professionals through its outreach programs. And they include Shop Hop, Off to the Races, the RPM Future Class, and many others. These programs engage talented young people across the country and connect them with mentors and a variety of opportunities in the industry. For more information on how the RPM Foundation is driving the future of collector vehicles skilled trade, visit rpm.foundation today. I've discovered Linkage. It's a new quarterly publication and website that covers the automotive market, driving, restoring, collecting, and discovering your passion for motor vehicles. Linkage is about experiences, opinions, and values. Linkage is an actual informed, reasoned opinion based on first-hand experiences. A talented Linkage team covers the automotive world, the people who share your passion and mine, smart, considered, rational, and experienced opinions, ones you can learn from and grow. That includes our passion that drives auctions and the collector car market. So come with me and join us on this journey. And be sure to use the code CARSYEAH when you subscribe, and they'll give you $10 off. Boom! Linkage, geared for the automotive life. Subscribe today at linkagemag.com. So, Jonathan, let's talk about, before we talk about your passion for cars, I want to talk about a big challenge, because you've worked in businesses in a career that's all about startups, innovation. I mean, your whole day is one big challenge, day after day after day. Some people really love that. Other people are scared to death of it. But maybe we talk about one big challenge you'd like to share. And more importantly, what was that really valuable lesson? Because challenges are great when they teach us things, even if they push us our backs against the wall.
Yeah, probably one of the things from my career I'd point to is when I set up In Motion Ventures for Jaguar Land Rover, which was not a traditional way that large car company went about thinking about innovation and mobility and how it's changing in the future. You know, as every car company now, whether it's Ford, GM, you know, it doesn't really matter. They have to think about business model transformation, and they have to think about how they change their products, because there's so much level of competition and disruption that's coming at them from all angles. You know, whether that's a Tesla or an energy company or another startup, it doesn't really matter. So this was back in 2013, and I had to help convince a business that was very risk averse, because, you know the history of Jaguar Land Rover in recent years. In 2008, it almost turned off the lights. You know, it almost went bankrupt. It was just hours, you know, away from that challenge. And so the business has a culture of being very conscious about every dollar equivalent that it spent, every pound. So there I was saying, well, look, the business is going really well because of all the Land Rovers it was selling, and the Evoque and the Range Rover and Range Rover Sport. You say, look, you need to think about change. But the business is going, oh, but we don't need to because everything's great. Okay, but think about 5 or 10 years' time when maybe everything isn't so great.
Right.
How do you protect yourself for that future? So I had a huge challenge to be able to help convince people internally to think about an alternative future, and for the business to think about that within the time frame of its everyday operations. You got to remember, in a car company, it's an industrial machine. It's thinking not only in the day-to-day of producing a car and producing, 60 cars an hour from a factory, or even up to 100 cars an hour. And how does it get those out to the dealers to then get into the hands of customers? And how do we therefore get the cash in? And that industrial machine has to be fed, and it has to be fed and also controlled in a way that delivers a high quality, safe product that meets all of the regulatory compliance that a car has to do, from a crash and an emissions and everything else, which is really, really difficult. So when the business is in that kind of mindset, it's very difficult to say, well, think about 10, 15, 20 years hence. How's it going to change and how do you protect your business? So it took me a long time to be able to work even at the most senior levels with the CEO and the board to be able to help them understand that future, but then also to get them to believe in me and what I was advocating about how we could disrupt how large corporates innovated. Taken a lot of the learning from the Silicon Valley, in this way of how do you fail fast and how do you experiment and think about things in a way that a large corporate typically wouldn't do that. And, whilst that's not uncommon now in 2022, even 9 years ago in 2023, that was highly unusual for most car companies, never mind, one that's based in the UK that had almost turned out the light a few years ago. So, I eventually found a way to be able to convince them, because I ended up going to the board because no one asked me to do this. I went to them proactively and tried to convince them with a business plan. I was an entrepreneur in some regards because I was trying to get them to believe in me and the idea that I was presenting to them. It meant I had to ask for money. That's always a difficult ask. It doesn't matter who you're asking, whether it's your dad for pocket money or,
Sure.
or whatever it might be. Never mind the CEO of, a very large car company to, give you several millions that you need in order to go set something up. So I found that I went to them and said, look, this is what I'm going to do. And here's the financial opportunity. They didn't believe me. Go away, try harder. Yeah. I went back the second time and said, okay, in the time that you didn't approve my, proposal the first time, this is what the competition has done. And because at that time, Jaguar Land Rover had a number of German seniors within the organization, they always looked to BMW and what Mercedes were doing. So, I said, look, this is what Mercedes and Audi and BMW have done in the intervening months. Oh, yeah, interesting. Okay, yeah, I can see. Yeah, but no, go away, try harder. So then I went away again, recut all the business case and transformed everything. And then I came back to them and said, here's the opportunity cost of not doing what I'm telling you. And at that point, then they went, because the opportunity cost was based on the forecast of plans of the core business that they thought was almost a certainty. But when you came along and you told them, actually, what you're planning for success could actually never materialize to the extent that you believe, because there's an unseen and also a level of change taking place that you cannot control, then actually you need to prepare for that future as a defensive mechanism for, the opportunity that you could lose in the future. And it wasn't until that point did then the light bulbs go on, and there was a trigger point that then allowed them to be more amenable and and willing to listen to my proposal and eventually give me the money that I needed to go off and set in motion ventures up for Jaguar Land Rover. So that's probably been one of the challenges. I mean, that's a very short version of the story. I could write a book on it. Yeah. But ultimately, I think it gives you a flavor of some of the advice. Is even if you get knocked back, never give up. That's advice number one. Number two, always find creative ways to help tell a story that will resonate with your audience. And you can tell that in a number of different ways. And number three, try to find the trigger that will get people to hook into your idea and your story that will then get you the permission to be able to do what you want to do. So that's what I'd say.
I think you do need a book or maybe a podcast, to share all that. It's fascinating. And I think every company and even down to every individual needs what you just called an entrepreneur, either someone else or someone within the organization that's working, kind of like you think of the skunk works of the old Ford Motor Company when Carroll Shelby would go out and build the GT40 or the GT350 or any of the cars they've done, to give those guys up in the ivory towers or that are looking at all this other current stuff another vision of the future that they really can't have. There's just not enough time in the day. It's a fascinating story. I love it. Really, really cool. Let's talk a little bit about your personal passion for cars. You mentioned that early on, that when you were a little kid, you could identify cars at the age of 3. Tell us about a special vehicle in your life.
Yeah, it would have to probably be the first car I owned, pretty much like everybody. For many, if you're American listeners, they won't probably know what it is, but it's quite a storied car to have when you're 17 years old. You got to remember driving, requirements are different, not only in the US and States, but also in Europe, it's slightly different. So we can drive when we're 17 in the UK. And so I was 17 and I had a Peugeot 205, 1.9 GTI. Now, if anybody knows what that is, they know that that's quite a famous, it went rallying, so it did Monte Carlo rally and everything else. But at the time you had this small car, fast car war between the French, and you had the Renault 5, GT Turbo, you had the Peugeot with the 205 1.9 GTI, and the Peugeot really was the daddy. It was also a hedge killer, and because if you weren't careful, you'd spin you around and put you in the back of a hedge.
A hedge killer. Now that's the first time I've heard that term. but at 17 years old to have at that time was about 150 horsepower, which everyone in the US go, well, what's that from a 4-cylinder engine? But when you got a vehicle that's weighing 750 kilos, and this, you got to remember, this is in when was I 17? Yeah, so 1995 kind of thing. So it's a long time. 1994, 1995. It was an incredible car to have at that age. But I guess the cars that are most memorable are the ones that I perhaps haven't owned, but I've had the privilege of driving. You got to remember, I was working at Mclaren at 23. I was like a kid in a sweetie shop. I was working at in a supercar company where I was responsible not only for all of the competitor intelligence, which meant I could get whatever car I needed in for evaluation. I got to drive all of the supercars at 23 years old, take them home, drive them on the Dunsfold test track. So, Top Gear, and in the UK, they use a circuit. They used to, when it was Clarkson and the rest of them. They still use it now for the current version of Top Gear, just not as often. It's the one that the Stig drives around. Yeah. And I know you have Top Gear USA, but there's obviously the British version. So because McLaren's not far from there, that used to be one of the proving areas that we'd take all the cars and we'd evaluate them. So I was 23 driving Lamborghini Gallardo, 360, 430, you name it, Porsche GT2, and I'd be taking them around. Not only was I trained and had driver training and taught to drive properly and driven cars alongside the likes of Chris Goodwin, who was the test driver at McLaren, then went to Aston Martin, and he's a racer as well. You were taking the vehicles round the Dunsfold test track around Hammerhead, and you were playing at being Jeremy Clarkson. I was 23, 24 years old. You didn't get any better than that. When you're someone who's passionate about a car.
Yeah, but I never had to pay gas. I never had to pay insurance, and I got to take the vehicles home,
Best of all
overnight.
Worlds,
So I guess many, many different driving experiences, and very fortunate. But I love cars in any regard. I love when I go traveling and I get a rental car. I love the lottery of never knowing what I'm going to get, and therefore the joy or the pain that ensues from learning about that car. But the one thing I'd say that I've always done, and it's the one thing I did at McLaren and I got our engineers to do in particular, was when we appraised a vehicle, I always tried to get people to wash it and to clean it, because you learn so much about a car when you clean it. You learn so much about the fit, the finish, the quality, and ultimately how the vehicle feels. That ultimately, tells you a huge amount about the character of the car. And you have to remember that behind every vehicle is a team of thousands of engineers, people that have produced it, and each car has its unique story, has a unique story about its birth, its creation, who it was serving. And one of the best ways to be able to appreciate that is actually to wash it and to clean it. And it sounds strange, but a lot of my experiences with cars are equally as fun from behind the wheel as it is with a sponge and a chamois leather in my hand, being able to wash them as well. And in fact, one of the pictures I have on my wall over here is me as I think I'm about 1.5, 2-year-old with my dad's car washing it, even in those early ages, washing my dad's Ford Avenger. If anybody knows what a Ford Avenger is, it was a European Ford product, not a great one. Most of the cars in the 70s, they rusted much like they did, in the UK as they did in the US.
Right.
So, but yeah, I've got every picture, even those that are behind me, of all the cars I've worked on and had the privilege to be a part of and play a role in helping conceive them, because that's it. You work with the designers, you define the product, you understand what it's about. You say, this is the target market. and you then translate that into a product that you ensure is going to meet the needs of that customer and deliver the best possible value for them. Because when you engineer a car, everything is a trade-off, and most people don't realize it's just a case of where do you draw the line and what kind of trade-off do you make. Typically those trade-offs are between performance and cost, weight, and a variety of other factors, and some companies make those trade-off decisions better than others. And it's why, having worked for McLaren, why I still maintain that the McLaren F1 is still the greatest car ever made, because it's the car that has the least amount of trade-offs and compromise ever in its engineering, because everything was done in the pursuit of no compromise. Right. Whereas the reality is even a Ferrari of today has a degree of compromise, because it has to be built, it has to be engineered to cost, it has to have a business case behind it. So it's very, very difficult to find a vehicle today that doesn't have some form of compromise behind it.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying 100%. I'm the same way when it comes to washing a car and seeing all those things. I think it was Gordon Murray that said, he was asked if there's one thing he would have changed on that F1. And he said, yeah, there was a hood latch that we could have probably made in one piece instead of two. It was that kind of, but yeah, if only all cars could be made that way. I'm going to crawl into your skull and be a little bit of a psychologist for you today. If you were manifest as a vehicle, Jonathan, what would you be, but more importantly, why?
Oh, that's a really interesting and difficult question to say as I put on the spot. Can it be a modern car or can it be any car from history?
Here's the way you need to think of this. It's not what you want to be. It's how you perceive the man in the mirror, yourself as a human being in a vehicle. So could be a Ford F-150 truck or it could be a McLaren F1. I don't know. That's where you've got to dig deep into your mind.
Yeah, I don't think it's a McLaren F1 because I'm certainly not highbrow enough. I'm from the north of England, so, I'm very much, in English you say a spade is a spade, so I think I'd probably be something part Italian because I'm part Italian as well as being British. I'd love to say a classic 1960s Alfa, maybe a Duetto, something that's got some longevity, something that people really appreciate and admire for what it is. It's not necessarily the highest performance, but it doesn't really matter because it's good fun along the way. So perhaps that's a good enough thing to say as an example.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, that was probably easier than you thought. So there you go. I like it. So let's talk about a great book that you've read that you'd like to share with our listeners. I love to talk about books, love books. Is there a book that you'd recommend?
Yeah, an automotive book. I'm actually just going to turn around and show it. So.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to recommend Mclaren Memories.
I've got a copy of that book.
Have you got a copy of that book?
Yeah.
If you think about McLaren and its history, it's actually defined in three parts. First is the Bruce McLaren era, then there's the Ron Dennis era, and then there's the post-Ron Dennis era, effectively. Yeah. Those are the three kind of mega chapters of McLaren. And being someone passionate about cars, when I went to McLaren, I was not only did I do tours of the factory as part of my, job and taking people around, and I'm talking about the McLaren Technology Centre, the one that you've seen that's shaped as a yin and a yang and, the lake and everything else like that. I was also fascinated by the real history of McLaren and where it came from, but also the story of Bruce McLaren, which is really, really powerful. And if anybody hasn't, listened to it about what this guy had to go to as a child, in particular because he had a lot of physical challenges that he had to overcome, to then obviously start racing in his original, little Cooper, and then doing his hill climbs, and then fundamentally how then he used that as a way to get over into, other series of racing and then come over to Europe because that's where it was for racing at the time, and then to found his team. And then you look at the history of their success in what was a great series, and I'll talk about Can-Am, because those Can-Am beasts, if you hear those going, I've heard one start up, oh my God, it shakes the foundations of a building, with the straight pipes. And, you look at the size of them, and then you look at pictures of Denny Hume. If you know Denny Hume and the pictures of Denny Hume, he was called the Bear, and he had arms and forearms like the Bear, because to drive one of those Can-Am cars, you needed to be physically capable of driving a Can-Am. But you look at the history of those McLarens, the Indianapolis car that also won at Indianapolis, the Can-Am cars, as well as then the Formula One cars at the time. And it's an incredible journey that he went on from his beginnings in New Zealand, his challenges that he had physically to have to overcome, and then the sad tragedy of his loss of his life. And if you think about what McLaren could have continued to be, and even before the McLaren F1 and what the supercar company is today, Bruce had dreams to create his first McLaren road car, and he produced one of them. In fact, there was a couple. He always had ambitions to create a car company, and that was always at the forefront. And when we were creating a little bit of the McLaren history within what is the supercar company of McLaren today, is that history of Bruce McLaren, his vision, and also his attitude. As much as Ron Dennis shaped Mclaren and how it came to be what it does, a lot of it remains the story of Bruce and his history of what he achieved.
Yeah, it's a marvelous book. It was written by Young. I forget his first name.
Ian Young.
Ian. Yeah. Marvelous book. Yeah, you're right. Eoin Young. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Welsh spelling of Ian.
Yeah, it's a wonderful book, and love the McLaren history, everything about it. Back when that F1 was being built, I got a special tour at the factory to go see that car being built because I was importing Facom tools, and Facom was supplying tools to McLaren at the time. I think also their F1 team. We got to go to their F1 factory for not the street car, but the race car as well. And it was just like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And who'd have thought? If only I'd had about they were $5,750,000 when they were new. Now they're $25 million cars.
What a great investment,
Yeah, well, but I didn't have that to begin with back then, so it didn't matter. But it's a great book. Yeah, the history of Bruce McLaren is absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to allow you to go on the ultimate drive. I'm your dream come true because money's no object here at Cars Yeah today. You can pick any car. You can pick any person to be with, living or someone who's passed, and you can be driving anywhere in this vehicle. So what does that ultimate drive look like for definitely a car guy like you?
I'd love to relive my memory from when I was a youth. My grandfather, who I, kind of hold responsible for my passion in cars, he was a mechanic. He was actually a Marine, an equivalent of a Marine for the UK in the British Army. He fought in the Second World War, and he was a paratrooper. So he was, going out of aircraft with the parachutes to then land behind enemy lines, in the Second World War. He unfortunately, on one of those jumps, he landed and he hurt his ankle, and they had to move him, onto something else. So they moved him into one of the regiments where he began fixing tanks. And he actually used to, when the tanks would break down on the front line, he'd have to take his recovery truck to go and, pick up the tank, avoiding being shelled and, mortared at the time.
Yeah, go pick up that tank. There's a Panzer over there shooting at it.
Yeah, exactly. And then drag it back and then fix it. So I've got all his original manuals of things he's written out about the mechanical. So I've got those from the 1940s in my cupboard somewhere that I'll always keep. He then stayed in Italy, because he was stationed in Italy during the war, because you had the Germans and at the south, and then the Allies at the north, and the Americans obviously were there as well with the British. And he then came back to the UK with his wife from Italy, which is why I'm part Italian. And he became a driving instructor. So, and when I was a little child, I used to go out with him on his lessons, and it was a Datsun Sunny. It was like a light pale blue, and this would have been in the early 1980s. And he was teaching his students to drive, but he would take me out with him, and he would give me the opportunity. He'd say, be quiet, sit in the back. But, I would be there listening, watching, and being part of him. So I'd love to recreate that, because my grandfather's never been able to see what I've been able to accomplish in my career, or, see a part of it. But I'd love to have that opportunity to be in his company again and be in that car. And whilst I'm not driving, it's one of those memories that's imprinted on my mind, and one that I'd very much love to experience again.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. Pretty darn cool. I love it. What a great story. You've taken us on a wonderful journey today, and a journey into the past and a journey into the future. And that's been pretty darn special. Before I let you go, is there maybe a inspirational quote or some words of wisdom you might share with us today?
Always be the pebble on the seashore, no matter how difficult things get. And being in this life, you'll always come against people that perhaps don't believe in you. Always have faith, always believe in yourself. And when things get bad, just let it all wash over you and be that pebble on the seashore. And I think, for me, that's always stood me well. Increasingly, as I've got more mature and more grumpier, as I've got an old man, as I am now, and ultimately, being able to think about how you let things go as opposed to holding on to them. And I think that can do us all a world of good.
I have never heard that saying, and I love it. It's absolutely wonderful. I grew up in the ocean surfing as a kid, and always be the pebble on the seashore. Now, is that a British saying?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's not a common British saying, it's not but it's just a way of saying, no matter what happens, just let things wash over you.
I love that. I need to like put that right in front of me on my computer every day. I get a little tangled up when things don't go the way I want them to go. Always be the pebble on the seashore. How can people learn more about ZipCharge?
They can go to our website, which is zipcharge.global. You don't even need to type the www. But you can if you prefer. And you can follow us on all of the social media platforms. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. You can connect to me on LinkedIn. We also have LinkedIn profile for ZipCharge. And also I'd encourage anybody that's interested in buying one of our units to register for pre-orders, which you can do on our website. There's a simple form, as well as very shortly we'll be sending out some questionnaires because we want to identify people for trial, those people who can test the unit and give us some valuable feedback. Cool. So we're encouraging people to sign up for that as well.
Jonathan Carrier, changing the future with the ZipCharge. This is so exciting. I love the look of the future for all of us. I think this is absolutely incredible. You've charged me up today here, Jonathan. This is absolutely brilliant. I want to do a shout out to Jules at Influence eMobility. He's the one who introduced me to Jonathan. Thank you, Jules. This has been great, bringing great people to Cars Yeah to share their stories. Jonathan, hey, thanks for being so generous today with your time and expertise and for changing the world. This is so exciting. Can't wait to talk to you again someday. Until you and I talk again, I'll see you down the road with a car that's fully charged.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's ride here at Cars Yeah. Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up, a fun book filled with gorgeous photographs of fuel filler fun, including quotes from more inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Download your copy today, and we'll see you next time on Cars Yeah.